Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SRP education event, Recession Proof Your Finances by Becoming a 401k Superhero. My name is Sarah Krapek, and I'm the Director of Participant Experience with SRP. We appreciate you joining us. This is our second event in the 2023 education series. So just a few quick notes before we get started today. All the lines are muted, but we do welcome your questions. So if you have a question, feel free to get out your cell phone and fire on the QR code that you see on this slide, but also on the presentation slides throughout our time together. That will take you to a very easy online form where you can submit a question, and I'll be monitoring those throughout our session today, and I'll do my best to ensure that we get to just as many as we can. This session is being recorded. I always get questions of where you can. It'll also be available right on our SRP YouTube page. And so with that said, I'm happy to introduce my colleague and our co-presenter for today, Jonathan Schulteis. Jonathan is the author of the book Focused, the Financial Freedom Formula. He has shared his concepts and philosophies on personal finance, helping hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals get their finances in order. He is the creator of the 401k superhero movement, and I'm thrilled that he agreed to join us today. So thanks for being here, Jonathan, and I will go ahead and ask you to take it away.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me. And guys, for all of you that haven't had a chance to meet, I'm Jonathan Schulteis. Nice to meet you. But a couple of years ago, I wrote a book called Focus, the Financial Freedom Formula. And the whole purpose was really to help participants get a better grasp on their personal finances. So the book actually led to 11 different TV interviews. I got to give a speech at the NASDAQ. It was pretty cool. So I give the book away absolutely for free. And at the end of the presentation today, I'm going to show you where you can go and get a free copy. I have a free electronic copy or a free audio copy if you'd rather download it and listen to it on your phone or your iPod or whatnot. Also, the book is available on Amazon, right? If you like a hard copy, it's on Amazon. And here's the cool thing. If you get on Amazon, I actually get royalty checks. So check this out. I got a royalty check last week, Sarah. It was huge. It was 70 cents. So almost enough to buy a pack of gum. So if you guys want a hard copy, I really appreciate the royalty checks. So otherwise, I put it on Amazon for the lowest it would let me put it on there for. So if you got Amazon Prime, you get free shipping. I think it's like $2 or something. So there you go. But today, really where I want to go is I want to share with you a few tips, right? I want to take some of the concepts from the book, but I want to relate it to really surviving a recession. And so, but here's the thing. We may or may not go into a recession. It's kind of unknown, but it's always a great opportunity to reassess your finances. And that's the direction that I want to go today is let's think about this as going, if we do go into a recession, what are some things that you can do to make sure that you come out the other end even stronger? And then if we don't go into a recession, you're just in really good financial shape anyway, right? And so I look at this, and one of my favorite quotes by Bob Proctor says, change your habits, change your life, right? And it's kind of interesting because if we look at the Webster's dictionary of basically what is a habit, the definition of a habit is a behavior pattern acquired by frequent repetition, right? So something you do over and over and over is the habit. But here's the interesting thing is that habit also becomes part of your identity, right? So it's interesting in the book Atomic Habits, James Clear actually breaks down the word, and he says, breaks down the word identity, and he says the original comes from the Latin word essentius and identium, which means being and your repeated beingness. So it's interesting when you put that together is your identity is your repeated beingness. Think about that for a second, guys, right? Your habit, something you do over and over and over and over, actually creates your identity. And so he actually goes deeper onto that, and he starts to talk about ways to change your habits. And so he talks about two ways to change your habits, and he talks about outcome-based outward-based versus inward based. And so he gives an example of someone who, let's say, is trying to quit smoking, right? And they say they're offered a cigarette and they say, no, I'm trying to quit, versus the person who is trying to quit smoking that's offered a cigarette and they say, I'm not a smoker, right? See, that person who's already identified as what they want, it's easier to change those habits. And so when we think of these things, I want you guys to kind of think of some of these habits, right? And think of an identity. And actually, that's what led us to creating the new identity of how you can become a 401k superhero, right? We call this becoming a 401k superhero to your future self. And so when we think about these things today, I'm going to give you a couple of habits that you can change, some financial habits, but think about this as changing these habits so that you can become a 401k superhero, right? So let's dive into this, because I talk about some of these in the book, but here's a couple of habits that are probably some of my favorite, right? And one of those habits is getting in the habit of paying yourself first. And so, what happens so often is, we get paid and we spend our money and we don't have anything left over at the end of the week or the end of the pay period. However, how easy would it be to go ahead and save and pay yourself and save first, right? And I love the idea of opening multiple accounts. You can open up a checking account, a savings account. You can even have goals-based accounts, right? So maybe you got a vacation account, and every time you get paid, you pay yourself and put a little bit of money over into those accounts. And so you could make it a game, right? Play a game. How can I save more? You could even use that to create your emergency savings account. I talk about a story in the book of, creating my own emergency savings account as I was trying to get my finances in order. And I talk about how as I was doing this, I actually lost my job, right? And so what's interesting is I remember a quote that says, if you have enough money to solve a problem, then you don't really have a problem. And so think about that for a second, right? Did losing my job seem like a problem? Absolutely. But if I had an emergency savings account to solve that problem, it wasn't really a problem, right? I was able to take care of it. And so I challenge you in that way too, is if we think about going into a recession, think about if you have enough money put to the side, a recession is probably not going to bother you, is it? Right? And how can you do it? Is one of the best ways to do it is pay yourself first, right? And have that emergency savings account. So another thing that I love to talk about, and we call this the 24-48-hour rule. And so before you make a major purchase, think about that for a second, right? Wait on it. How many times do we just have that impulse, right? We go to the store. I know, Sarah, you and I were talking about this. You go to the store and it's like you see something and you go, oh my gosh, I'm just going to buy that, right? What if instead of just making that impulse purchase, you slept on it? Right? You thought about it and you waited a little while. Often I find myself, I talk myself out of things, right? I go, I don't really need that, but it seemed like at the moment you thought you needed it. And so, what if instead of buying that, you actually took some of that money and put it over into your savings account, right?
So, and Jonathan, you and I were talking about this in preparation for this webinar, and I was talking about if there are any parents in our audience today, you can probably appreciate that every time you're walking through Target or Walmart or 7-Eleven or wherever with your kids, they're always asking for something. And one of the things that we like to do at SRP is talk about how to pass on financially good habits to our kids. So I love this 24-48-hour rule, not only for ourselves as the, chief financial officers in our own homes, but raising up our kids, maybe tell them to pause as well. Hey, we're not going to buy that today, but if you sleep on it and you're still thinking about this thing tomorrow, you can't get it off your mind, I'd be happy to bring you back and allow you to make that purchase. So, so that's something that we do in our house, and a good habit that maybe you can adopt and pass along to your little ones as well.
Absolutely. I love that. It works on me. So I would imagine it's probably work on your kids too. So I know you were telling me a little bit about this right here.
Yeah. So I couldn't help but see the irony in this situation, which happens to be an actual picture from my household just probably about 3 weeks ago. So one Friday night, heard a gurgling noise and smelled a nasty smell coming from the basement. Walked in to find that our sewage, or there was a pipe backup into our basement that just created, thankfully, a small, relatively manageable flood, but still a stinky, nasty mess, and something that required us to call a repairman. So someone was able to come out the next day, but promptly slapped down this $664 bill on our lap. It was actually the day before Easter. So we had plans to be celebrating with family and friends. And then this unexpected expense popped up. And it's just another example of how no one is immune from these unexpected expenses. And that if you have that emergency account, so many people ask me, Sarah, how much should that be? We always suggest starting with $1,000 if you can.
Absolutely.
Most emergencies, studies show, are under $1,000, just like this one that I recently had.
Yeah.
So if you have that money set aside to help solve that problem, and then you can work to replenish and pay your emergency fund back, then hopefully it doesn't disrupt your ability to save for your future and your ability to carry on with regular monthly living expenses. So just a real world, unfortunate example from the Kraypak household recently.
Yeah. So here's another one. This is one of my favorite tips here. I call this pay yourself to save money, right? And you go, what does that even mean? How do you pay yourself to save money? And so I'll tell you this story. So my wife comes home from the grocery store one day and she says, hey, honey, we saved $50 at the grocery store. And so my question is, what did you do with it? Right? And she looks at me like, what are you talking about? And I said, you saved $50, but did you really save $50? Did you put it in a savings account, or what did you do? So we actually created a thing that now when we save money, we actually pay ourselves, right? So it's like combining this along with tip number one of paying yourself. So imagine using a coupon, right? If you use coupons and you save $20 or $30 when you go to the grocery store, what if you actually took that $20 or $30 and now moved it into your savings account? Now you've actually paid yourself to save money, right? That helps build your emergency savings account and other things. Another one is to pay off credit card debt. If we go into a recession and you're carrying a lot of credit card debt, man, that can really be crippling. You know, we did a study for a group and we're showing them that if you had a $5,000 account balance on a credit card at 24% interest and you made the minimum payment, guess how long it takes you to pay it off? It's 19 and a half years. Right? Not only that, but that $5,000 that you pay back over the 19 and a half years, you end up paying back almost $14,000 after interest and everything else. So, you know, if you're carrying credit card debt, now's the time to get rid of it. A great way to do that is to use 0% interest credit card offers. And I shared this tip with a participant the other day, and she had no idea this existed. She was carrying about $3,000 of credit card debt. She was making the payments on it. And she's like, Jonathan, it's just not going down. Right. And so, I talked to her. I said, well, what is your payment? And she said, it's about $130 or whatever she was paying every month. I actually went over to NerdWallet. Right. And we pulled this up and I found a 0% interest credit card for 18 months. And so we took what she owed, divided by 18 months. And guess what? It was like $5 more than she was making in payments. So for $5 more in 18 months, I showed her how she could be completely out of credit card debt. So using 0% interest credit cards is a great way to get rid of some of those credit card debts. Another one is, too, you could actually use the debt snowball. I know Dave Ramsey made this really popular, but the debt snowball is basically laying out your debt smallest to largest and actually freeing up some extra money to put towards the payment. And then when that first debt's paid off, you use that payment and apply it to the next one. And then first two's paid off and you apply both of those payments to the third. So it just gets bigger and bigger like a snowball and helps you pay it off. Another one that very few people actually realize that they can do is if you've made your credit card payments on time, you can actually ask the credit card company to lower your interest rate. Think about that for a second. Most people have no clue that you could do this, But if there's other offers out there for 0% interest, credit card company doesn't want to lose you, right? They want to keep making interest on you. So if you call them up and say, hey, I'm considering switching over to a 0% interest card, right? Can you give me a break? Often, as long as you've been making payments on time, a lot of times they'll do that. So consider these things if you've got credit card debt as a way to kind of get out of that as we go through a recession. Another one is, and I call this is, celebrate your success, because often we don't even think about it, but one of the best ways to reinforce good financial habits is take a second and celebrate. Now, I'll warn you, when I say celebrate, doesn't mean go out and spend more money, right? Often people go, I'm going to go celebrate by buying something. No, a celebrate, just, get a little fist pump or, something to kind of reinforce that good behavior that you just created, right? Because celebrating is what's going to reinforce it and keep you doing those things, right? So now let's talk about my tip number 2. And tip number 2 is invest in yourself. And what's interesting is, as I was preparing for this, I actually went over to Google and I Googled companies that started during a recession. All of these companies were created in a recession. So think about that. We often go, oh my gosh, a recession is bad. And, but a lot of companies are developed in a recession. So what does that mean for you, right? And, a lot of times as we think about, going into a recession, you always hear cut your spending and do this and do that. And we always hear the example of cut out your morning cup of coffee, right? And so I actually looked at a couple of things here. And I think instead of cutting out the morning cup of coffee, what if you invested in yourself and became more valuable? And what if you got a 5 or 10% raise, right? So here's the difference of cutting out your morning cup of coffee, say over a month, and you save $30, where if you got a raise, could be anywhere from $250 to $500, right? Way more valuable to invest in yourself to become more valuable than it would be just, maybe cutting expenses or cutting out that morning cup of coffee. And so one of my favorite authors is a guy named Napoleon Hill. And so Napoleon Hill wrote a book that you may have heard of. It's called Think and Grow Rich, right? And that book was written in the 30s during the Depression, right? Who better to tell us how to survive a recession than a guy who wrote a book during the Great Depression? And so in Think and Grow Rich, he talks about some of his principles. And one of those principles, he says, the man that does more than he's paid for will soon be paid for more than he does. Think about that for a second, right? If we go into a recession, if you're the person that's doing more, right? Maybe at your job or at work, you're doing more, you're going above and beyond, and we go into a recession, you're probably not the one that's going to get let go if there's layoffs, right? So, think about that for a second of how can you become more valuable? And so Dan Sullivan says, all money earned ethically is a byproduct of value creation. And so if that is true, then the question is, how do you become more valuable? And so that's a big question to think about. How can I become more valuable to my employer so that I survive a recession better? And so I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but there's been a big trend over the last little bit about online training courses and different things like this. And you've seen all these things pop up, right? There's Masterclass where you can go and take classes on almost anything you can think of. Another real popular one is Udemy and Skillshare, and even LinkedIn Learning has things that you can go and learn. And I was sharing this presentation with another group, and their company actually pays for them to go to LinkedIn Learning. So most of these things are really inexpensive. I think Masterclass is it's like $19 a month. It's about the cost of Netflix, right? And so you can go on, and I guarantee you, whatever your job is, there's probably a training course on there for you to learn how to do it better. In fact, I was seeing a commercial the other day. Coach K, who just retired from Duke, is teaching a class on there about leadership, right? So there's all kinds of things on there. I'm sure there's something that you can learn on there that can help you do your job better and become more valuable. Because, it reminds me of the quote from Oliver Wendell Holmes that says, the mind, once stretched by a new idea, never regains its original dimension, right? So investing in yourself is a way that you become more valuable that you can't ever lose. We talk about, your investments and investing, and during a recession, if the market goes down, you lose money, but you never lose knowledge that you gain. Right. So investing in yourself is one of the best investments you can make, because if it makes you more valuable, you become a more valuable employee, then you're going to come out the other end of this so much better by taking a little time and investing in yourself. So that's my tip number 2. And so as we look at this too, and my tip number 3 is, if we go into a recession, we talk about reviewing your investment portfolio. And so my rule of thumb when it comes to reviewing your investment portfolio is, if you've got 10 or more years before retirement, gotta stay the course, right? Don't make a change. I'm often reminded when I have conversations with people who were so worried during 2008 when we saw, major market pullback. Those people who stayed in the market and didn't jump out and didn't make changes came out so much better on the back end of 2008. And so, I look at this and say, if you've got more than 10 years before retirement, retirement's such a long-term thing anyway, right? You got plenty of time to make it up. In fact, I would almost make the argument for you guys who have more than 10 years before retirement, one of the best things you could do is actually increase your contribution. Right? If the market goes down and you increase your contribution, you're actually buying it on sale, right? Especially if you've got a lot of time to make it up, then why not buy it while it's down, take advantage of it on the upside so that it goes up, you make more money. I always give the example of a person who was buying, putting $100 into their 401k every payday, and they were buying a mutual fund that traded at $25, right? So $100, they buy 4 shares. If that mutual fund goes from $25 down to $20 and they put in that same $100, now they're buying 5 shares, right? And if all it does is come back to 25, then they've actually made $25 and the market never went up, right? So if the market goes down, it's a great opportunity for you younger folks to really kick up your contributions. Now, on the same note there, we talk about those folks who are in that 10-year window, right? You guys are the ones that may want to have a conversation and actually have a portfolio review and look at your account, right? So, we talk about what's called sequence of risk, and that sequence of risk is that first 5 years before retirement and the first 5 years in retirement. That time frame is the frame that you want to really take a closer look at your investments. And so if you guys are, in that period where you're getting closer to retirement, yeah, it might make sense to really take a look at your portfolio and see if you need to make any changes. And so for you guys here, if you want to request a consultation with one of our wealth members and wealth advisors at SRP, just to have a look at your portfolio, here's the QR code that you can go to and actually request a meeting, or you can actually email at plantoday@srp.com. So you guys can reach out to us and we can have a conversation. We can review your portfolio. We can see if, what changes that you need to make. We can really start positioning you for having a comfortable retirement to make sure that your investment portfolio, along with everything else, really survives a recession. So another thing is, when I started the presentation, I told you guys here at the end, I show you how that you can get a free copy of my book. And so you can visit thefocusbook.com and you can download a free copy. Here is the QR code that takes you right over to that website. And you can download a free copy of the book, electronic copy, or an audio copy of the book. Even on the website, there's a link to the Amazon page where you can buy it there. And there again, I really appreciate the 70-cent royalty checks that I get, right? So you can go over there and get a hard copy, or you can get a free electronic copy or audio copy just by downloading it here. So. And the other thing too that we like to invite you guys to do is find us on Facebook, right? We've actually started the 401k superhero page on Facebook, and you can come over and we're sharing tips and things about getting your finances in order. So reach out to us there on Facebook, and reach out to us also if you have any questions and maybe you want to have a review of your portfolio. So guys, I really wanted to keep this short and sweet, and I hope you found value in some of the ideas and tips that we've given you. And if you have any questions, you can also ask questions. So Sarah, did we get any questions as we went through this?
Yeah, so we do have a couple questions here, and they're good ones. I'm going to start with an easy one, Jonathan. It said, could you repeat the quote about ethical money and value creation? So could you pop back and repeat that?
Dan Sullivan says all money earned ethically, right, is a byproduct of value creation. And so value creation is you create value, right? And so think about it like this. Your employer, you're valuable to your employer, right? Your time and what you produce in that time, your employer pays money for it. If you become more productive in that hour, then naturally you should get more per hour, right? So that is what I mean by that. So it's a great, I wish I came up with that, but that was Dan Sullivan. I love that quote.
Yeah, and I wanted to weigh in. We did get a question about how to change your risk tolerance in your portfolio by selecting specific types of funds during a recession. And I wanted to weigh in on this one because something that Jonathan did not mention is the importance of a risk tolerance assessment or questionnaire as potentially being the starting point for a good conversation, either with yourself or your financial planning partner, or with us here at SRP. So you may be participating in a 401k or a 403b for years and not truly understand how your personal feelings of risk align with your portfolio. So the very first step might be to take a short questionnaire so that you know if in general you're a conservative, moderate, or aggressive investor. And then we take that attitude, that investor attitude, and we can match it towards fund selection or target date fund selection in your 401k. So if you go to srpretire.com and click on our resources page, you'll see that there is an investor profile assessment there, which would be a great place to start in kind of figuring out for yourself how your profile lines up. And then we can have a real productive conversation to say, hey, is this matched up to the investments in my plan? Or do I really need to realign and make some different choices? That can happen no matter what your age is. Or where you're at in your career.
Another point to that too, Sarah, is we talk about changing your risk profile. I think it depends too a lot on how much have you saved. And, a lot of times we're showing people how their 401k relates to income. If you've got enough money saved in your 401k, maybe you could afford to take less risk. Right. So as we look at that, so there's a lot of going to, talking about your own risk profile, but how much you have saved. Right. And there's a lot of times I'm talking to people who, have done a great job saving, and we're de-risking just because they don't need to take on any additional risk because they've done such a great job saving. So that can be part of the conversation that you have as well.
Sure.
It's a good question.
Yeah. And then, Jonathan, there's been so much talk about actually saving, but we did get a question from one of our guests that said, so what happens when you quit working and now you need to pull money out of your 401k? So do you want to weigh in on that one?
Absolutely. So, that's a great thing. And I feel like I walk people through this a lot. In fact, I'm actually having this exact conversation with my mom right now, right? Because she just retired, believe it or not. She's been saying she's going to do it for years, but she hasn't done it. And so now here we are. And so what we're looking at doing is, you've done this accumulation, you've got this money saved up, right? And so we take a look at, how much you have. We look at how much you need, right? And then we factor in Social Security, and the goal is what is the difference between your Social Security and what you need? And we're actually setting that up for her to come every month to show up in her checking account, right? So that's one of the things that we can do is we can actually look at how much do you need? We can set up periodically that amount of money shows up every month to help bridge the gap of what her Social Security pays and what she needs to finish her living expenses. So same way, it's really simple, guys. We sit down and we go through, like Sarah said, a risk profile. We look at how much you've saved. We look at how much you need, how much you have coming in. Do you have a pension from something else? Do you have Social Security? What other income sources do you have? And then your 401k is designed to fill that gap or bridge that gap there, right? So every month is coming in like clockwork. So the whole goal is replacing that paycheck, right? How do we make it show up every month just like your paycheck did? Because now that you're not working, you still got to be able to pay your bills. So I think it's a whole process that we go through. So, sounds really simple, right? But to sit down and actually just look at it and do the numbers. And I challenge people, it's just like I challenged my mom. I said, how much do you need, right? Look at your real expenses. And so once we said, okay, this is what you need, this is what your Social Security is, then we set those goals to make it happen.
Yeah, that's the first question that any good planning conversation is going to start with is, what do you need? What are you going to need each month to live your lifestyle within your, definition of your comfort zone? And that can kind of be the springboard toward a more numerical conversation about what we need to do to make that happen. So again, we would invite you to schedule a meeting with one of our team members here at SRP if you're looking to dive into your personal situation and get some thoughts and, our advice around what you may want to do, depending on if you're still in that savings phase or looking to be in that retirement zone in the near future. One last question, Jonathan, and that is, we talked a little bit about debt today, debt management. You talked about the debt snowball. It's an age-old question. Would you weigh in on, should I contribute to my 401k if I'm trying to get out of debt?
Oh, I get this question a lot. And so really the deciding factor on that is what kind of debt is it, right? Is it secure debt or unsecured debt? And what is the interest rate? Because I have this conversation, and I feel like if you ask 5 different financial advisors, you'd get 5 different answers, right? But here's the thing, if you got credit card debt and that credit card debt is at 24% interest, it's really hard to earn 24% interest in the market. But if you can save 24% interest just by paying off some of that debt, then, when it comes to credit card debt versus saving for your 401k, I say make sure you're getting the company match, but try to get out of credit card debt as quick as you can. Now, if it's secure debt at a low interest rate, right? Because I have some people that come to me and say, hey, Jonathan, I'm thinking about paying off my mortgage and my interest rate's 2%. I'm going, nah, you're probably better off putting it into your 401k, right? And saving for retirement because the interest rate's so low. But if that same conversation, they were like, yeah, I got $5,000 at 24% interest, man, that right there tends to make more sense to pay it off. So kind of a loaded question, right? So if it's high interest rate credit card debt, I like paying it off first. If it's low interest secured debt, yeah, you're probably better off saving in your 401k. And here's the other thing is we talk about retirement. Man, I feel like I'm on a little tangent here now. But the thing about like your mortgage, I have a lot of people who are like, want to pay a mortgage off. And I say, well, how many more years do you owe on the house, right? As long as the house becomes paid off before you retire, then, that's the goal, right? So I don't like paying it off too early because that's money you could have gotten probably leveraged a little bit better in your 401k. But if it's as long as your mortgage is going to be paid off before you retire, then that would still make sense, right? Go ahead and pay that low interest rate, make the regular payments on it, maybe even pay a little bit more, not a whole lot more, but just enough to make sure you get the mortgage paid off before you retire. And then you got less debt. So the less debt you have in retirement, the better off you are too. So, but I feel like that's a really good, that's a loaded question because I think it could go a lot of different ways. But that's my feelings and thoughts on it.
Well, it's also a very relevant question for our young savers, people who are just starting out, who might
Hmm.
have student loan debt. We get that
Oh,
question all the time. Should I be paying off my student loan debt or should I be saving for my 401k? Oftentimes, the answer is some kind of a blended approach. But again, we, as your advisor team here at SRP, we're here to help you guys and weigh in on these kind of financial topics, among others. And we'd love to support you on your financial journey, wherever you may be, whether it's budgeting, debt management, saving, um, you know, among other things. So we appreciate you all joining us today. Thanks for sharing some of your time. Just as a reminder, a recording will be sent out later this week. You'll all receive an email with a link to the recording, and then it will be on our YouTube page as well. And mark your calendar. On August 15th, we're going to be doing our third session of 2023, and that one's going to be all about Medicare. And believe me,
mm.
if you are approaching a Medicare decision yourself, or maybe like Jonathan, you're kind of assisting a parent kind of through that stage of life, it'll be a 45-minute session worth attending to learn a lot about Medicare options, decision making, and we'll even hook you up with some free resources that day as well. So mark your calendar for August 15th. Invitations will be coming later this summer. Again, thank you all for joining us. And Jonathan, why don't you pop up that QR code one last time in case folks want to get in touch with us and schedule a consultation. Other than that, that's all we have planned for today, and enjoy your afternoon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you.